Hello guys, I hope you are doing good. Welcome to the 17th video in the series, or 18th I guess, 18, 19, 20th. Yeah, 18th video in the series where we are solving top 20 common JavaScript interview questions for SDE1. So in this question we are going to create or write a polyfill for the Promise.all method. This interview question was asked in ThoughtSpot MTS frontend interview, which is for the senior position for 2+ years of experience. For the SDE1 position with 2+ years of experience. So as you can see in the round 4 in the hiring manager, it was asked to implement a polyfill for Promise.all. So if you see, as per MDN, the Promise.all accepts an array of promises and returns a promise that resolves when all of the promises in the array are fulfilled, or when the iterable contains no promises. It rejects with the reason of the first promise that rejects, which basically means that we have to pass an array of promises. So here in the example you can see I've created a function that returns a promise. I have passed a duration and it will resolve that promise after the specified duration. So we have 3 promises over here, and the Promise.all will take all these promises. It will return a new promise on top of that, and that new promise will resolve with the result of these 3 promises, or the array of promises that we have, if all of them passed. Otherwise it will reject the promise with the error of the first promise that fails from the array of promises. So here we have 2 examples where in the example, well, when all the promises resolved, we get result as 1000, 5000 and 3000, because that's what I'm resolving with the duration. So that's what you get as output. In the second example, we have a condition where the duration, if the duration is less than the specified value, it will reject the promise. So in this you'll see that the promise task 1000 gets rejected, and that's why we see the output with the rejected promise. So using this example we have to implement this polyfill. Let's try to create this method myPromise.all. So as you saw, this method returns a promise. So let's create that const myPromise.all, and this will take an array of promises. So promise array, and then this will return a new promise. So return new promise. That promise will either resolve or reject, and inside this we have to do the processing. Now what I have to do is I have to iterate over all the values of the promises. So for that I'm going to make use of for each loop. So promise array dot for each, and each value is a promise, and then we are going to make use of index as well. That is because these promises resolve at different time. Even if I'm invoking them with the for each loop, which means they will start invoking parallelly, they will resolve at different time. So the execution maybe start at same time, but the execution will end at different times. So we have to make sure that only when all the promises are resolved, then we are returning or resolving with those values. So here let me create a variable to store the outcome of the promise. So let result equals to an array. This will return or will pass this result to resolve if all of these promises passes. If any of them fail, we have to reject with the error that we get with that promise which has failed. And second, I'm going to use a tracker to make sure how many promises have been completed. We have to invoke this resolve only when all the promises are resolved, not invoked. So for that only I'm going to make use of tracker promises completed, and it will be 0 at the beginning, and then here I'm going to invoke the promise, this promise dot then, otherwise we have catch. So catch will throw us error. If we get the error, we have to basically reject with the error. So this is simple. When you get an error or any promise that throws an error, we basically reject with the error. So we can do that. Let me just wrap this. So this will do the work, and then in the then method we have to add a check. If the promise has resolved, which means we got the value, then what we are going to say is we are going to store that value at the same index at which the current promise is, just to maintain the track, because the promises can resolve at different times. So I'm going to make use of this index to make sure we are storing the result at the same index at which the promise is, and this will store the value. And here I'll say that promises completed plus and equals to 1. So I'll increase the tracker that a particular promise has been completed. At the end, I'll add the check if promises completed equals to the number of promises we have, which is promise array dot length. Then we are going to resolve, and we are going to resolve with the result. So this is how you implement the polyfill for my Promise.all. Now let's use the example to see if things are working properly. So let me take the first example where all the promises resolve. Let me copy everything from here, and then I'll paste it. And if I run this, then we should get 1000, 5000 and 3000 in output, because all the promises will resolve. So there was a delay. Let's execute this again, see if things are working. The results is not defined. Result, we have results over here at line number 12. Okay, this is the result, not results. Let's run this again. So we got 1000, 5000 and 3000 in output. Let me reduce the time so that we can have the outputs faster. So 100, 500 and 300, we should get 100, 500 and 300 immediately, because the promises are resolving. Let's see the second example where the promises are failing. So I'll just copy this from here, and I'll just update these values. And here also let me reduce the time, 500 and then 300, and I'll add a check of 300 over here. And if I run this again, you should see that we get rejected in the error, because for the first value it is getting rejected. Now let's update this and change the order. So let's say if I keep 300 over here and 100 over here, then also we should get the error, because this is failing. Again we see we got the error rejected, which means our implementation for Promise.all polyfill is working fine. Next we'll implement Promise.any polyfill, which is basically completely opposite of the Promise.all. So I'll see you in the next video.